I'm Thomas Reed, host and producer of the Read My Mind radio podcast, and you are listening to the audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series, Beyond Your Narrator episode.
This is Roy Samuelson, and I'm so proud to introduce Ricky Enger. Thanks for joining us, Ricky.
Thank you so much, Roy, for having me.
Let's start by asking what you love about audio description.
Well, it's interesting because I'm actually kind of late to the audio description party. So there's a lot that I love about audio description, but it's only been relatively recently, say in the past 2 or 3 years or so, that I've actually gotten into audio description. It wasn't that I didn't need it. I've been totally blind always. And so whatever I watched on TV was without audio description. And part of that was feeling a little self-conscious because I'm watching it with someone else who is sighted and I didn't want them to be distracted. And then I had sort of this probably kind of an arrogant viewpoint that, well, I can figure out what's going on based on the dialogue and the sound effects and that kind of thing. And I felt like I was going to miss out on some of those things. So the movie score, the sound effects, things like that, I didn't want audio description to distract from that. But turns out that audio description is really pretty cool. And one of the things that I like about it is that I have had to rewrite some of the things in my head, things that I believed had happened in certain movies or shows. Turns out I was way off base. So having audio description really helps out with that. I think it adds a lot to the movie or the TV show that I'm watching, especially in scenes where maybe they're texting back and forth, or scenes where perhaps there are subtitles. Like, I'm a big Trekkie, so in Star Trek, for example, if there are lots of subtitles, the Klingons are speaking and I don't speak Klingon, so having access to that kind of information that's readily available to everybody else, I really like that about audio description.
Those gaps were before you were using audio description, you were filling those in as what you could based on the information you had.
Yeah, and it's amazing just how often I was wrong about that, or just how much I missed for some of the subtle nuances. So if I was watching with somebody who was sighted, and a lot of movies have musical montages, or there's the big chase scene at the end. And so I'm looking at my phone just because my attention isn't held by the movie, and the person I'm watching with says, oh, they're just chasing each other through a bunch of buildings, or, oh, they're walking along the beach and it's really romantic, and just different stuff keeps happening. And that was enough for me then, until I figured out what I was missing.
I'm curious about how you discovered it 2 or 3 years ago. Was it a friend of yours, or did you just stumble on it?
So actually, I began watching with my fiance, who is, he's low vision, so he has some vision, and he routinely used audio description. And, for him, this was just a way of life. And I thought, okay, sure, I'll watch some things with you. Why not? I realized, wow, I've been missing so much. And the other part of this is that before then, I would be watching things with my son or other friends who were sighted, and I knew that audio description was available, would occasionally turn it on, but I spent the whole time being very self-conscious. I was told repeatedly by the people I'm watching with, no, it's actually really cool, or no, I'm not distracted by it at all. And yet still, I felt very self-conscious about it. And I just kept thinking, oh, what if a spoiler alert happens because the audio description says something just slightly before it's available visually, or whatever. I was really overthinking it in a way that it turns out I didn't need to.
And I'm glad to hear that has proven, I'm assuming has proven not true in most cases.
Yes, yes.
Do you share audio description with other people, whether they're sighted or blind?
So usually it's one of those things that if we are watching as a family, so my fiance and our son are watching something together, then there's audio description. And so it's kind of a family affair. Everybody's used to it. And when we have friends over, they're perfectly comfortable with having audio description there. Now, when it comes to going to pre-COVID, obviously, but when we would venture out to the movie theater, that's an entirely different process where the entire movie theater isn't experiencing audio description, of course, but you get these devices that are meant to broadcast audio description. And I think this is a really neat approach, at least when it works, which sadly for me has not been very often. But when it does work, I love being able to hear the soundtrack, the really loud kind of movie going experience, and then have my own set of headphones where just I'm getting this private audio description kind of piped in to me. And so I'm enjoying it alongside everyone else. And nobody has to know that I'm doing something different, I suppose.
It seems like with each experience of audio description, there's been the occasion or the possibility of some barriers that prevent you from getting what you're looking for. Can you address any other specific examples of that?
Yeah, so I'll speak about that from my personal experience and then from my experience working with others who may not be entirely tech savvy. And so, I think both of those things are valid things to address in some way. So for me, I generally haven't had a lot of issues accessing audio description at home. But when I go out to the theater, what tends to happen a lot is, again, you are handed a device at the front desk whenever you get your ticket for the movie and you go to customer service and say, hey, I'd like to get one of the audio description devices. And one of two things happens then. Number one, they may hand you an assistive listening device, which, while very useful for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, is not so useful for me. So it's meant to amplify some of the things that you're hearing in the movie theater. And there isn't audio description on that device. So the managers or the theater employees aren't necessarily familiar with what each thing does. The second thing that can happen is that perhaps you are handed the right device, yet it isn't tuned to the right theater. I have watched audio description for an entirely different movie. Now, obviously, I didn't keep it on, but I've had the audio description device tuned to an entirely different theater. And the really bad part about this is that since none of the previews, sadly, are audio described, you don't know that you've gotten the wrong thing until the movie starts. Then you're like, oh, okay, I've got to get out of the theater and go and miss the first 15 minutes and see if the employee can find what I'm looking for, with the possibility that it's wrong again. And so usually when that happens, I just say, I'll catch it on home video with audio description and I'll watch this first time without it. So those are some of the things that I encounter personally. The issues with audio description that tend to come up when I'm working with other blind and low vision people as a part of my job are that many people don't really care much about technology. They just want to be able to watch TV kind of effortlessly, right? So accessing audio description can sometimes be a nightmare, whether you are watching it from a live cable feed, and each TV is different, each model is different, and so the method by which you may access the secondary audio channel or the audio description channel may be different. And a lot of times it's inaccessible. So there may not be just a simple button that you can press on the remote to access those things. And so a lot of people aren't able to access audio description without the assistance of a sighted person. And believe it or not, we don't always carry one of those in our back pocket. So that can be kind of an issue. Then there are the platforms like Netflix and Hulu. And so happy to say that Netflix certainly has come a long, long way in terms of providing audio description on just about every platform, whether you're watching it from your phone or perhaps an Amazon Fire Stick or whatever. You're able to access audio description on those platforms, but you may need someone to walk you through that or describe how it works, because even though it's accessible, it may not be super straightforward on all platforms. One thing that I hope to see in future is some standard. It's going to be a pretty straightforward experience regardless of the platform that you're accessing it on. So someone who has little to no technical experience can just push a button and lo and behold, there's audio description. And now we can get down to the business of watching the TV show or the movie.
And with that, no carrying a sighted person in your pocket.
Yes.
All joking aside, do you find that education for these companies, recognizing what they're doing and how they're doing it and how you as a user use it, does change things?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And I think that it's often clear which companies have had direct input from people who are blind and low vision, and which companies are sort of going about guessing it and saying, well, we included it and it's technically there and we've checked the box. And so our part of this is done. And I think that includes, unfortunately, not having education for those who are working in customer service for these companies. So if you have a product that isn't working for whatever reason, and audio description could certainly be an example of that, or something that you're looking for tech support with, it's reasonable to expect that when you call the company, they A, know what you're talking about, and B, have a set of steps that can assist you in solving this issue. And at present, that's not always true. You know, I think some companies get it a little better than others. And so that gives me hope. For some companies, there's a little ways to go, right?
Some companies think that a service that's created by blind people for blind people can be done without blind people. That you
Yeah.
named, this isn't tokenism. It's definitely an enhancement to their own services that they provide to their consumers.
And it's interesting that you say that, both because yes, I think some companies don't necessarily have the human aspect well established, in that we've done this to be nice, but they haven't really thought through the person on the other end who's wanting to watch a show or whatever, and they haven't really recognized that that person is in most fundamental ways just like they are. And so things that a developer would never put up with, they're sometimes happy to say, well, we gave you this, aren't you grateful? Maybe it's not perfect yet, but you should be grateful for what you have. The other interesting part of this is that it is an enhancement. Not only is this of interest to blind and low vision people, but I have found that in watching things with audio description with other people present who don't really need it, they still find it an interesting addition to the experience. And they become fascinated by what gets described and what doesn't. Or, you know, I've had instances where somebody has walked into the kitchen to get a drink and the movie is still going and they're like, hey, I didn't miss anything.
That getting used to it, regardless of the audience, that as someone gets used to audio description, that it becomes you said it, it can be an enhancement.
Absolutely. Sometimes you, as a blind person, may still wish to not share that experience with everyone, or maybe you have people in your family or people who are your friends that come over to watch things. They might get distracted by it for whatever reason, regardless of how cool it is. I love that there are solutions for that issue as well. So, Spectrum, with the ability to access from your smartphone the audio description track to many of their properties while still just broadcasting the unenhanced version of that on the TV, is a really, really cool step forward, I think, because it means that you can enjoy your audio description in whatever way you see fit.
When I think about the experience of audio description for all audiences, my assumption is that it's kind of a microcosm in the sense that audio description is something that maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, and in my opinion, takes a lot of care and craft and talent and provides, as you said, the gaps, whether it's finding out about what's being texted or the subtitles or the music montages. Each of these things provides access. I love thinking about audio description as a microcosm of different advocacy efforts. Can you think of other analogies to accessibility that might be parallel to how audio description is evolving?
That's an interesting question. I think that it's really fascinating to me how often things that sort of make it into the mainstream were actually originally accessibility features. I think that many of us probably talk to our smartphones on occasion. We may talk to our smart assistants, and the quote unquote mainstream audience wasn't necessarily how those features were born. So you would have something like the Dragon Dictate program, which allowed people who are not able to use a standard keyboard for whatever reason to then speak to their computer and remain productive. From that, I think that other people who didn't really need those features, it was still understood that, hey, wow, this can actually save a lot of time. Hey, wow, this is a really interesting way to interact with technology. And it's something that is intuitive for everyone, regardless of how tech savvy they are. And so here we are having something that was originally an accessibility feature having evolved to be in the homes of millions and millions of people.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audiences?
The one last thing that I want to talk about is just kind of looking forward now that I have really gotten into audio description and recognized just how wonderful it can be, and just all of the artistry that's involved in describing, a ton of things that are happening visually on the screen, and being able to choose those things that really help to enhance the experience, whether that's moving the plot forward or just evoking whatever emotion is there in the scene visually. There are still a number of ways that I think audio description can expand, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's interesting. I almost hesitate to say this because I will get such flack from so many people I know, but I have not in any form seen Hamilton, but I know a lot of people who have, and it's on the list. I'll get there. But the thing that's fascinating to me about Hamilton, I was kind of watching a lot of discussions of people who experienced it with audio description, and there were some people who were just ecstatic. Oh, I'm so glad that this is available, and I really felt like I got a lot out of it. And there was another group of people who, while they were really happy with what they did have, the discussion was that Hamilton isn't just about figuring out what the plot is and having some visual description to move the plot forward. There's the dancing, there's the costumes, there's a ton of things that you, as an audio description writer, for lack of a better term, would have a really hard time squeezing in to this. And so I'm wondering just how many people would like to know the things beyond what currently exist in audio description. And through no fault of those who write this, it's really more a matter of there's just so much to take in. And for some people, they don't really care about the costumes, they don't really care about the dancing. But for those who do, what does the future look like for people who want to enjoy a comic book adaptation or a musical and really have access to all of those things that aren't essential to the plot, but are still a really big part of the experience. So I have no answers for what that might look like, but I'm happy that we are actually at a point in history where there is so much audio description available that now it's not about thinking, wow, I really wish I could have maybe 3 shows in a year described, to, wow, how can we push the envelope forward?
And pushing the envelope forward is one of my favorite words is nuance. Those nuances, those conversations are happening. And like you said, even without the answers, the fact that people are asking the questions, it's definitely beyond that checkbox that you mentioned.
Yes.
How can people reach you?
You can find me on Twitter. So I'm Ricky, RICKY _Enger. You can also reach out to me at my workplace email. I'm enger@hadley.edu. And if you're interested in checking out some instructional videos for technology, independent living skills, and that kind of thing, do check out the Hadley website. I'm on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Ricky Enger, all one word, no underscore there, and happy to chat with people via email or social media.
Thanks so much for joining us, Ricky.
Thank you for having me, Roy.